Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Fundamentals. I'm Adam, joined alongside with April. And today we have a special guest, Linda Czipo. She is the president and CEO of the New Jersey Center for Nonprofits. Linda, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
So, today we're going to be talking about advocacy and lobbying, which are two important topics for nonprofits, especially right now with everything going on. So, before we really kick it off, Linda, do you want to give a little background about yourself?
Sure. I've been with the New Jersey Center for Nonprofits for more than 30 years, and the center has been around since 1982. And in a nutshell, we exist to help to strengthen New Jersey's nonprofit community in service to the people and causes that nonprofits serve. And we do that through a variety of programs: advocacy and public policy, convening nonprofits, providing technical assistance, guidance, information. We're a membership organization. We gather nonprofits for an annual conference, and we do a whole bunch of other things as well.
So, you're busy, basically.
We have a great team, and
That's
yes, there's
great.
a lot to do.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So yeah, I'm just gonna jump right into it then, because so we're talking about advocacy and lobbying. So first question I wanted to ask you to get the ball rolling is why are both advocacy and lobbying important in shaping public policy? And maybe if you also want to just define what advocacy and lobbying are.
Sure, and probably start with the second one first. For the purposes of this conversation and nonprofits, advocacy and lobbying are two ways to influence public policy in at the local level, state, federal, etc. And in a nutshell, advocacy is identifying a broad-based problem to be addressed, and lobbying is kind of a subset of that. Uh, because lobbying is influencing legislation and specific public policies. Why is that important? Because in the nonprofit world, we're trying to solve and address deep-seated public needs. And while it's critical, the direct services and programs that nonprofits provide, it's also just as critical to get to the root causes of a lot of those issues. And that's how the two go hand in hand. Um, if nonprofits are silent on these issues, then their viewpoints, their expertise go unheard in policymaking circles. So voices are needed to fuel good public policy and to prevent bad ones from being enacted.
Very true. Yeah. So are grassroots efforts a little different than actual advocacy and lobbying?
Well, they're related. I mean, a lot of it depends on where the momentum is coming from. On a grassroots mobilization effort, the all of the work is coming, or it's being led by the community. Just as the name kind of implies, a professional, and I'll put that in quotes, lobbying effort might be more internally led. You work on the inside to try to achieve an objective, and they're two very related elements of all sorts of strategies that can, along with lots of other components, that can help to fuel good public policy. But that's kind of the basic difference between them. But organizations that are really successful utilize both to great effect.
Mhm. Yeah.
So with lobbying, I know there's a lot of different opinions that people have on what is or isn't allowed when it comes to what's considered lobbying, what
Mhm.
falls under advocacy. So what are the common misconceptions that you've kind of seen between the two?
And I guess the first misconception that we hear still a lot is that this stuff is illegal for
Yeah.
public charities to engage in, and that is absolutely not true. There are laws on the books to clarify what those definitions are and to ensure that public charities are actually allowed to lobby and engage in this work and be active in this space. Um, in terms of how you define them for purposes of what's permitted and what's not. The IRS has some very important definitions there. And what's important to keep in mind is lobbying. Again, lobbying is a subset of advocacy. And lobbying is allowed but limited for 501c3 charities, but there's a lot you can do there. Advocacy, communications that do not involve lobbying, broad-based kind of public policy communications are not limited at all. Charities can do that without limit. So the biggest misconception is that you're not allowed to do this stuff at all, because that's just not true. There are other misconceptions, though, that have to do with gee, I don't know if my organization has the time or the expertise, or it's just too complicated, or all sorts of things like that. And again, this is something that I like to equate it to finding a job. If you're looking for a job, you bone up on the issue, you build relationships, you make a good case, and similar kinds of skills that involved in job seeking or fundraising. And if you've done those kinds of things in your professional career, in your nonprofit career, you have the skills that it takes to be a good, effective advocate. And you even if you haven't done those things, these are the kinds of skills that people engage in every day. And unlike finding a job, this isn't something that you have to do or should do alone. It's better done in a group with partners, and there are lots of other people that you can join forces with.
So you mentioned there's limits on lobbying. What are those limits?
For a 501c3 public charity, the law says that lobbying can be done only as long as it's an insubstantial part of your activities. How is that defined? There are two ways to define it. The default is a facts and circumstances test, which is measured based on all sorts of things. It could be based on how much you spend on lobbying. It could be based on uh, volunteer activity on a high profile issue, things like that. It is what the phrase implies. Fortunately, there's a better way for most charities to measure this, and that's to tell the IRS via a short form that you want to be measured by the expenditure test. And that is quite literally, you're measured by how much you spend on lobbying as it is defined in relation to what your budget is. And for most organizations, that's a very advantageous way of looking at this and measuring what you do. And it gives you a fair amount of latitude because the definitions are a lot clearer. So that's kind of in a nutshell. There's more detail involved in it, and we certainly have it available, but that's kind of the biggest difference.
Mhm. Right. So a 501c3 can engage in lobbying. There are just some limitations in place.
Correct. Public charities. The restrictions are a little more on private foundations, but if you're a public charity, there is a lot that you can do in this space, and it is legal.
Mhm. Yeah, good to know.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
So just moving forward, can you think of any recent examples where really advocacy kind of led to a success story for advocacy for nonprofits?
That there are a lot of them. And I'm going to actually start with some that are not necessarily so recent, because if you think about some of the most important social change legislation in the last century or so, nonprofits have been an integral part of many of those. Civil rights, voting rights, environmental protections, child labor protections, the Americans with Disabilities Act, marriage equality, so many others. And nonprofits have been at the forefront of many of those really, really important achievements. Unfortunately, or importantly, we know that those protections are not absolute. We have to safeguard them. But that's a real, those are just a few examples that, I personally draw lots of inspiration from. More recently, there's some very important wins. Think back just a few years when COVID was first starting to hit, and the relief programs were first starting to be developed by Congress, and laws were passed, et cetera, et cetera. Nonprofits were not part of that equation first because the laws were drafted in ways that made nonprofits ineligible to benefit. So a lot of really aggressive and important and sustained advocacy on the part of nonprofits across the country resulted in that being changed. So if you think about things like the Paycheck Protection Program and the employee retention
tax
credit,
credits.
other
Yes.
things like that. And so that it's also important. And you look on the state level, all sorts of worker protections, paid family leave, minimum wage, earned sick leave, all sorts of things like that, and many, many others are just some other examples of really important wins for nonprofits. And sometimes it's also important to um, oppose and successfully defeat legislation that would be bad, and that there are plenty of examples of that too.
So nonprofits continue to be like the unsung heroes of society, whether it's helping individuals or pushing societal change, they're doing it all.
Yeah, and more important than ever.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Would you say that a lot of nonprofits engage in advocacy kind of in-house with employees that they have, or a lot of times are they hiring consultants to help with the lobbying or any of the advocacy?
So it's a little bit of both. A lot of the organizations we see are engaged in lobbying with their own staff and volunteers. And that's probably even more common, but many organizations also employ contract lobbyists, paid consultants, and whatnot. And again, there's kind of a they both can be really important, and there's no necessarily right or wrong way to do this. But uh, it really depends on how you want to accomplish your goals, and quite frankly, what your budget is, and other kinds of factors go into it as well.
Mm. So for a smaller organization that really hasn't delved into this space too much, where would they get started if they wanted to engage in more advocacy for their mission and for their consumers? Where would they start?
Really, the first thing I would suggest is that they find other organizations that are active on their issues. There are lots and lots of them. If you're concerned about the arts or concerned about protecting people with developmental disabilities or protecting the environment, and you can go on and on down various subfields and issues in the nonprofit community. And there are organizations that are leading the charge on almost all of these issues. And, as I said before, this isn't something you have to do alone, and it's better often that you don't. There's strength in numbers, strength in coalitions. So you can find those organizations, or we can even suggest them if you contacted our organization. The other thing I would suggest is make sure that you know the rules and know where the boundaries really are. There's certain things that 501(c)(3) organizations can't do, and you need to be aware of that, like partisan politics or endorsing candidates. Those kinds of things are absolutely prohibited for nonprofits. But if you're staying within the advocacy public policy space, understand where the boundaries are so you can feel safe doing this, and then partner up with others who are doing the same thing, and that will be really, really helpful both for capacity and momentum and just kind of overcoming perhaps the potential intimidation factor.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Going with a group instead of going alone, especially from that at the start if you're smaller.
Yeah, there's always strength in numbers. I mean,
Yeah,
even established organizations, it's really important to mobilize allies and develop coalitions and partnerships and get lots and lots of people behind you, because that matters when you're trying to talk to public officials and get them to understand that these issues are really important. And you're going to fight, let's face it, you're competing with a lot of different voices to get your issue heard and prioritized. So that takes sustained activity, and it often takes a lot of voices.
Yeah. And there's a lot of nonprofits, I think, doing similar things, right, with similar missions. So maybe different locations, different communities with similar missions. So great for them to kind of come together all as one voice.
Absolutely.
that makes sense. So, I guess, for a closing question, what would be one piece of advice you would give to a nonprofit leader who's just starting out exploring advocacy for their organization? What will be the one thing you want to tell them?
I guess I just echo what we were just talking about. Understand what, first of all, get the buy-in from your leadership. Whether, if you're the exec, get the buy-in from your board, or if you're on another level of staff or your volunteer in an organization, get the buy-in from your leadership. Understand what the rules are. Find organizations that are active and passionate about the issue as well. And those are three things that will really, those are kind of the first things that get you along. The other thing I will say, and I know this isn't one, make those relationships before you need to ask for something. Build relationships with your elected officials, other partners. Invite them to visit your facility if it's appropriate, or just request a meeting so that they can understand what you do. Build that relationship so that when your issue does come before them, there's a sense of familiarity and understanding that will help to fuel that conversation. So that's probably, all of those things are kind of number one at the same time.
No, that was a great comment about, getting to know the individuals before you need their assistance. Yeah, a lot easier for someone to give you help if they already know you.
Yes, absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I think that's all we have for today. So, Linda, thank you for joining us, talking about advocacy and lobbying. Um, and that's it for our video today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.